Hey Reddit, I'm here because my life has completely imploded, and I have no idea how to deal with it. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for 5 years. For the most part, I thought we were happy. Sure, the last year or two wasn't exactly smooth. Our intimacy was practically non-existent. She always had an excuse. Work is exhausting, I'm not feeling well, or my personal favorite, I'm just stressed. I'm not proud to admit this, but things got so bad that I started to believe her. I figured maybe the spark had just died a little, and we were in a rough patch. I've heard that happens in long-term relationships, right? So I kept my head down, gave her space, and tried to be supportive. Then, a couple of months ago, Sarah's company threw a big work party. Now, these parties weren't anything new. They happen every few months, but she always came home worn out, a little tipsy, and passed out on the couch. But this time, she came home different. I was half asleep when she walked in, but she didn't stumble in exhausted like usual. Nope, she came in all giggly and excited. She was wearing this slinky dress she hadn't worn in forever. At first, I thought she was just in a good mood. Maybe the alcohol was talking. But then she did something she hadn't done in months. She tried to initiate intimacy with me, right there and then. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't gonna say no. It had been so long since she even touched me like that. So, we had a night that I thought was maybe a sign things were getting better. Maybe that spark was finally coming back. I had hope, but that's when everything started to unravel. In the days following that night, I was feeling optimistic. Maybe that work party had somehow reignited something in Sarah. I didn't question it much at first because, let's be honest, I was desperate to believe that things between us were turning around. The sudden interest in being intimate after months of being too tired or stressed felt like a win. I thought maybe I'd been overreacting this whole time, convincing myself that something was wrong when it wasn't. But soon enough, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. First off, Sarah suddenly seemed happier. Not that I wanted her to be unhappy, but the change was so abrupt it was jarring. She started coming home later and later after these work events, always with the same excuse. Networking is important, or it's just part of the job. She'd get dressed up in outfits I hadn't seen in months. Tight dresses, high heels, and a lot of makeup. And when she came home, she'd be flushed, acting overly friendly and flirty, but only for a while. She'd still keep her distance from me during regular days, which didn't make sense if she was suddenly interested again. There was one night, though, when it really hit me that something was off. She was getting ready for another one of those work parties, and I noticed she was wearing a new dress. I complimented her, and she shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal. Then she did something strange. She mentioned how she might be late, and not to wait up for her. That wasn't typical for Sarah. Even when she came back late, she'd always check in or at least text me. But not this time. Felt like a warning or maybe a test. I stayed up anyway, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, feeling this growing knot in my stomach. When she finally came home around 2 a.m., she was in one of those overly cheery moods again. She flopped onto the bed, makeup still smudged, and gave me this sloppy kiss on the cheek before turning over and falling asleep like everything was perfectly normal. But that nagging feeling in my gut told me something was very, very wrong. The next morning, I couldn't shake the weird vibes from the night before. So I casually asked her about the party, who she saw, what they did, small talk. She seemed almost too rehearsed in her answers, like she had practiced them in her head. Oh, it was great. Just the usual people, nothing special. She threw in a few names of coworkers I'd heard before, but she was vague. No real details. I started to feel like she was hiding something, but I wasn't ready to confront it yet. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who accuses his wife of cheating without any real proof. But deep down, I think I already knew. It was after that conversation that things got weirder. Sarah started guarding her phone like it held state secrets. She used to leave it lying around the house, but now it was always in her hand or shoved into her purse. She'd even take it with her to the bathroom, which she never used to do. One night, while she was in the shower, I heard it buzzing with notifications from across the room. I walked over, heart pounding, and saw a message pop up from someone named Mike that said, "Last night was wild. Can't stop thinking about it." That's when the walls started closing in on me. When I saw that message from Mike, my stomach dropped. My heart was racing, but my brain was in complete denial. Couldn't be what I thought, right? There had to be an explanation. I mean, this was Sarah, my wife, my partner. She wouldn't do this to me, or so I kept telling myself. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at her phone, trying to convince myself that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew. That message, "Last night was wild." What else could it mean? Still, I didn't open her phone. Couldn't. Something in me just wasn't ready to fully face it. I put the phone down and tried to act normal when she came out of the shower. I smiled, asked her how her day was, and pretended everything was fine, all while feeling like I was drowning in my own thoughts. For the next few days, I was on edge, constantly watching her, analyzing every word, every glance. She'd leave for another work event, and I'd sit at home, my mind running through every possible scenario. Was she meeting this Mike guy? Were they together at those work parties? I wanted to confront her, but part of me was terrified of hearing the truth. So I kept my mouth shut, hoping I was wrong. But the universe had other plans. One night, Sarah went to another one of her infamous work parties. She left around 7 p.m., wearing that same damn slinky dress that now made me feel sick to my stomach. I tried to keep my cool, told her to have fun, but the moment she left, I felt this overwhelming urge to find out the truth. I couldn't sit there any longer, just letting her lie to my face. So, I did what I swore I wouldn't do. I went through her laptop. It was synced with her phone, so I thought maybe I could find something there. My hands were shaking as I opened it up and logged in. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just emails, work documents, some random notes. But then I opened her messages, and that's when I found it. There were texts between her and Mike, and they weren't just flirty, they were explicit. Descriptions of what they'd done at previous work parties. Detailed plans of when they'd meet again, and jokes about how I was none the wiser. Mike even referred to me as the poor idiot husband. I sat there, numb, reading about how they had snuck off at every work party for months. Every time she told me she was too stressed or tired for intimacy, she was sneaking off with this guy or others. Apparently, Mike wasn't even the only one. There were other names mentioned, coworkers, random guys she met at these events. It was like her phone was a receipt of every betrayal. And the worst part? The messages revealed something I never expected. She was pregnant, and it wasn't mine. In one of the more recent texts, she was talking to Mike about how she'd deal with it, how she didn't know whose it was, his or another guy she had been with at the last party. But she made it clear she was going to pin it on me. She said, "He'll never know. I'll just tell him it happened that night. I finally gave him some attention. He's too stupid to realize the timing doesn't add up." I felt like I was going to throw up. My entire world came crashing down in an instant. Not only had she been cheating on me with multiple guys, but now she was pregnant, and she planned to lie to my face and tell me the kid was mine. I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking, and I slammed the laptop shut, as if closing it would make all of this go away. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I'd been played for a fool. And now, this woman, this bitch, was going to try to trap me into raising some other man's child while laughing behind my back. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I was done being the clueless husband. It was time to confront her. And I had a plan. That night felt like a lifetime. I paced around the house, replaying everything I had read. My heart was pounding, my fists clenched, and my mind was racing through every possible way this confrontation could go. Should I scream? Should I stay calm? Should I even give her the chance to explain, or just pack her things and throw them out on the lawn? But deep down, I knew I needed to hear her lie to my face one last time. I needed to see how far she was willing to go to cover this up. When Sarah finally walked through the door around 1 a.m., She looked startled to see me sitting on the couch, waiting for her. She quickly composed herself, though, flashing me that fake, innocent smile she'd been using so much lately. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice dripping with casual indifference. "You're up late." I didn't say anything at first, just stared at her, feeling the anger rise in my chest. She kicked off her shoes and walked over, leaning down to give me a kiss on the cheek. I flinched away from her, and that's when she knew something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone shifting. There was a nervous edge to her voice now. I stood up, still not saying a word, and walked over to the kitchen counter where her laptop sat. I opened it up, turned it around to face her, and clicked on the messages between her and Mike. Her face went pale the second she saw them. "Care to explain this?" I said, my voice ice cold. She stared at the screen for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I could see her brain working overtime trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no way out for her this time. I had caught her red-handed. "Look, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, her eyes wide, clearly panicking. "Mike, we were drunk at the party, and it was a stupid mistake. I swear, it didn't mean anything." I let out a bitter laugh. "A mistake? You call screwing him and half your office at every work party a mistake? Oh, and let's not forget the fact that you're pregnant, and you don't even know if it's his or some other guy's. But you were just going to let me think it was mine, right? How stupid do you think I am?" She froze, her eyes filling with tears. I could see her trying to figure out what to say next. I could tell she was scrambling, trying to regain control of the situation. But there was no saving it. "Babe, I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. It all got so out of hand," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I love you. You have to believe me. I love you, and I made a mistake. It doesn't have to change anything. We can still raise this baby together. You don't need to know who the father is. It can just be us." The audacity. She was actually trying to spin this like I should be grateful to raise some other man's child while she parades around, screwing whoever she wants. The rage inside me boiled over. "I'm not raising another man's kid," I snapped. "And I'm sure as hell not staying with a lying, cheating bitch like you." At that moment, something in her face changed. The tears stopped, and her expression turned cold. Ice cold. It was like she'd flipped a switch. Gone was the remorseful wife begging for forgiveness. Now she was glaring at me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "Fine," she spat, her voice venomous. "If that's how you feel, then leave. I don't need you. I never did. You were always just convenient, you know? A safe option. But let's be real, you were boring. No wonder I had to look for excitement somewhere else. You couldn't keep me happy." Her words were like knives, each one slicing deeper than the last. But something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to let her tear me down like that. Not anymore. "You think I'm just going to walk away and let you get away with this?" I said, my voice steady. "You're the one who's going to pay. I'm done being your fool." She rolled her eyes and turned toward the bedroom. "Whatever. Get your things and get out then. I don't have time for this." But I wasn't finished yet. I had one last card to play. One that would make sure she didn't come out of this unscathed. The next morning, while Sarah was still asleep, I took matters into my own hands. I wasn't just going to leave quietly and let her move on like nothing happened. No, she was going to feel the consequences of her actions. I grabbed her laptop, synced her messages to my phone, and forwarded all the incriminating evidence to her boss and HR department. I knew her company had a strict policy about interoffice relationships, especially when it involved senior employees like Mike. And with the explicit nature of those texts, there was no way they could ignore it. Then I went one step further. I sent everything to her family and friends. The truth was coming out whether she liked it or not. She wasn't going to spin this and play the victim. Everyone was going to know exactly what kind of person she really was. By the time she woke up, I was already halfway out the door, suitcase in hand. She ran after me, screaming and cursing, but it was too late. I was done. As I drove away, I got the first few responses from her coworkers and family. Shock, disgust, betrayal. Her world was crumbling just as mine had, and it was only the beginning. There was no turning back now. I had lost my wife, my marriage, and the future I thought we were building together. But at least now I wasn't the only one suffering. A few days after I walked out, the chaos began. Sarah's life started to unravel just like I knew it would. I had blocked her on everything by then. Phone, social media, email. So I didn't have to hear her frantic attempts to get in touch with me. But I knew exactly what was going down because word travels fast, especially when it's juicy gossip like this. First, the fallout at work. It didn't take long before Sarah was called in by HR. I heard through the grapevine, thanks to a mutual friend who worked there, that Mike had been fired almost immediately. Apparently, his sleazy behavior wasn't exactly a secret, but the texts I sent were the final nail in his coffin. As for Sarah, she wasn't let go right away, but she was demoted and put on some sort of probation. I guess the higher-ups didn't take too kindly to her role in all the office drama, especially with multiple co-workers involved. She tried to keep it quiet, but people talk. Her reputation was trashed, not just at work but everywhere. Her friends, who I had also sent the texts to, started distancing themselves. Some of them reached out to me, apologizing for not seeing through her lies sooner. It was weird, but also validating. It wasn't just me anymore who saw the real Sarah, the manipulative, self-serving person she had hidden from everyone else. I even got a call from her sister, Rachel. She was furious. Not at me, but at Sarah. Apparently, Sarah had lied to her too, making me out to be the bad guy for months, complaining about how I wasn't good enough for her, how I didn't care about her needs. Rachel apologized on Sarah's behalf, but I could tell she was still trying to process it all herself. Her own sister, someone she had looked up to, had been living a double life. As satisfying as it was to see Sarah's life falling apart, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. I wasn't some heartless monster who could just walk away without feeling the weight of it all. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of thinking I knew this person were gone in the blink of an eye. It felt like a part of me had been ripped out, leaving this gaping, empty space. But no matter how much it hurt, I refused to let myself spiral. I focused on getting my own life back on track. I moved into a temporary apartment and started meeting with a divorce lawyer to get things moving legally. I didn't want anything from her. Not the house, not the car, nothing. I just wanted to be free from the toxic mess she had made. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received an email from Sarah's lawyer. She was contesting the divorce, claiming that since she was pregnant, I was financially responsible for the child, despite everything I had uncovered. Apparently, she wasn't ready to let me off the hook so easily. She had concocted this entire narrative where she was the poor, wronged wife, and I was supposed to step up and play daddy to a kid that wasn't even mine. I couldn't believe the audacity. She was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to use me as a safety net, even after everything I knew. But there was one huge flaw in her plan. She couldn't hide the truth from a paternity test. I got my lawyer on it immediately. I wasn't going to be tied to this woman for the rest of my life because of a child that wasn't mine. The test would prove everything, and then she'd have no choice but to back off. In the meantime, though, the stress of the whole thing started to weigh on me. I couldn't believe I was in this position, fighting to prove that I wasn't the father of the baby my wife conceived during one of her many flings. The thought of her even thinking I'd go along with her plan was infuriating. It was like she didn't even see me as a person anymore, just a backup plan. A guy to fall back on when everything else blew up in her face. But I wasn't going to be that guy. Not anymore. Part 8. A small victory. The paternity test finally came back, and it was exactly what I expected. I wasn't the father. The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. Finally, I had proof, undeniable scientific proof, that this child wasn't mine. Sarah couldn't lie her way out of this one. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, holding the results in my hands, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It was over. I could walk away from this nightmare without any further ties to Sarah, without the guilt or responsibility she was trying to push on me. I sent the results to her lawyer immediately, and within days, the divorce proceedings started moving forward. Sarah's attempts to contest were shot down, and she had no choice but to accept that I was done. She tried reaching out to me again, of course. Emails, phone calls from unknown numbers, even showing up at my apartment once, pleading for a second chance. But I was done listening to her lies. I didn't need to hear her excuses anymore. She'd lost her job, her reputation, her friends, and now me. Everything she had taken for granted was gone, and she had no one to blame but herself. It's been a few months since all of this went down, and I'm still processing everything. I've moved into a new place, a small but comfortable apartment, and I've started to rebuild my life. I'm going to therapy, trying to make sense of everything that happened, and more importantly, figuring out how I let myself get so blindsided by someone I thought I knew. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that trust is fragile. I trusted Sarah with everything, and she shattered that trust over and over again without me even realizing it. I think the hardest part wasn't even finding out she cheated. It was realizing how long she had been lying to me, how calculated it all was. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she didn't care how it affected me. But I've also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I'm not going to lie, there were times when I felt like I was drowning in the betrayal, but I didn't let it break me. I didn't crawl back to her or beg for answers. I took control of the situation and walked away with my head held high. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, my advice is simple. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let yourself get stuck in a web of lies because you're afraid of the truth. And if someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't waste your time trying to fix a relationship with someone who doesn't respect you. As for me, I'm focusing on myself now. I'm taking the time to heal, to learn from this, and to move forward. It's not easy, but I'm getting there one day at a time.